I was born on a station where day was scheduled and night was a policy. And I learned early that silence is a language if you stay long enough to hear it. My name is Jackson Rook, captain of the exploration cutter Kiteswake, registry 3A17, retired escort hull with a good heart and a stubborn air recycler. My ship carries 6 people, 1 patient machine mind, and the last of my certainty. We were 3 weeks into a quiet lane when the universe cleared its throat. It wasn't a distress call, it was older than that. An echo in a carrier band used by a civilization that liked its stories neat. The message threaded a string of coordinates through background hiss and ended with something I still have not been able to call anything but a lullaby. Our learning system, Vesper, played it once, then muted her lights in the way she does when she's interested. Origin? I asked. Star Galenor, 3rd planet. A waterstone world with oxygen you could sing in. And Captain, the surface tech signature is pre-combustion age. Pre-combustion, Annika Sato repeated from the nav bay. First officer, strategist, fatalist when she's tired. As in bows and plows. As in steel and scripture, said Mara Quinn, the engineer who can talk a bad bearing into behaving. And someone up there has a transmitter smart enough to counterfeit antique static. We set our course for Galenor because curiosity has gravity. The Kiteswake is not a warship. She's a library with engines, full of notebooks and mistakes we kept on purpose. My crew was small and habitually brave. Annika, who can make 3 choices look like 1. Mara, who can convince electrons to fling themselves into order. Dr. Lian Chen, biologist and rule breaker when ethics get lazy. Rafe Okoye, quiet as a locked drawer and just as useful when things go wrong. And Tamsin Rowe, linguist and comms, who can make strangers feel like relatives 5 minutes after they decide not to kill her. We came in quiet behind Galenor's gray moon and looked down at a world that had rehearsed sunrise for a very long time. Forests like velvet, rivers teaching cities where the good ground lives. I saw spires and walls, markets like spilled coins, and above all else, shapes in the sky too deliberate to be weather. Birds? Rafe asked. Large birds? Tamsin tried. Vesper widened the image. The shapes were not birds. They were dragons. Long bodies with the logic of aircraft and the arrogance of cats, moving as if gravity were a rumor. One passed through a cloud and came away gilded. Another folded its wings with the ceremony of a book closing. Annika exhaled. Medieval world, dragons included. Either this is a very committed reenactment, or someone is helping it stay medieval, I finished. Vesper agreed. There are orbital assets, dozens. Too small for a ring, too many for casual debris. Their emissions are curated, as if the planet lives inside a story. Mara drummed her fingers. A quarantine crown. Seen one in a museum once. Anthropology gone feral. Name the custodians, Annika said. Vesper took a breath she didn't need. Tentative ID, the Meridian Array, post-human block, famous for conservation projects, infamous for making the word conservation do the work of 3 different lies. I watched the little blue planet swing and thought about what we do when we say we're being careful. Put us down in the woods, I said, close to people, but not close enough to hurt them if we make a mistake. Captain, Vesper said like a friend about to disagree, remember our oath. I remember, I said. We won't teach them how to burn themselves faster. We'll listen, and if someone up there is sitting on their neck, we'll lift. Vesper dimmed the lights again. Approval or prayer. We sat down in a glade that smelled like rain, thinking about arriving. The sky was the kind of blue that convinces you you've done something right. We walked out into air full of pollen and a sound like the softest saw, the forest building itself. A horn called from the ridge. It was answered from the valley. And then, because stories have habits, the trees parted and a knight rode in on an animal that looked like a horse if a horse had met a glacier and taken notes. The knight wore enamel and steel and a practical frown. Behind her walked a child carrying a banner and a sword he could not have lifted if it had been honest. "Hail," the knight said, in a language Tamsin caught in her fingers and braided into understanding. "You are not pilgrims. Your garments speak of foreign saints." "True enough," I said through Tamsin, and bowed the way you bow when you want to meet people again later. "I'm Jackson Rook. We're travelers. We're trying to leave places better than we found them." She considered me like a recipe she was not yet sure would rise. "Lady Mira of Stormhold," she said. "This is Page Coren, and that is Aeth, who consents to be seen." Her chin ticked up. The child's eyes went wide. A shadow passed over us, the size of a decision I was not ready to make. The dragon came down like a curtain drawn slow. Aeth was the color of slate at dusk. Close, she was the cathedral that decided to learn to fly. Her head alone could have held me twice. She put her face near mine and breathed. It smelled like mountain rain and metal warmed by hands. "If she bites you," Lady Mira said, very calm, "it will be because she likes you." "That's always been my luck," I said, and did not step back. Aeth's pupils narrowed. Something like a smile arranged itself in the planes of her face. Then her mind touched mine. "Small, bright creature," she said without a mouth, "your bones hum interestingly. What song do you serve? There are moments when lying is an insult and telling the truth is a gamble." "Freedom," I said. The dragon's breath warmed my throat. "Acceptable," she said. "Do not make me regret tasting you." Lady Mira watched, and when I did not die, she nodded once, in a way that meant her world had just gotten more complicated. She told us about harvests and roads and a winter that had learned to be gentle lately. She told us about the Sky Priory, where men in gray kept mechanical saints that predicted weather and insisted tribute be brought at the equinox. She told us about dragons that chose their riders and men who hated anything they could not own. "Sometimes," she said, "Aeth looks up at night and growls. We say it is her stomach making poems, but I think she's fighting something we cannot see." Mara's mouth went a line. Annika's went another. I felt a familiar thirst, justice mixed with the cockiness that ruins it. We camped near Stormhold's wall. We ate bread that tasted like the word home, and listened to Page Coren talk about learning the names of stars. He had a brave grin he'd obviously practiced. He asked me whether my sword sang. "It used to," I said, "but I left it in the sky." He laughed like I'd given him a present. At dawn, we traded stories like children trading marbles. They gave us fruit that tasted like summer at 10 years old. We gave them a small trick with mirrors and fire that would not change their tech, but made their ovens kinder to their hands. It felt like duty done right. Then we climbed the ridge where the dragon had growled at the night and aimed our eyes there. The Meridian array is good at being invisible if you dream in straight lines. I don't. We saw them because we remembered that cruelty is efficient. The satellites were the size of pilgrim bells. Their orbits were a tangle only a miser would love. They fell into patterns as we watched, grids that came and went like the expectation of rain. When 2 or 3 crossed, the very air below them shimmered as if the planet had been asked to hold its breath. Behavior inhibitors, Mara said. They see combustion, metallurgy beyond bloomery, certain kinds of mathematics, and they tilt probability. Just a hair. Enough that the coal's always damp, the alloy's always brittle. The bright kid always gets drafted to shout about borders instead of numbers. The dragons? Rafe said. Likely designed to fit the story, Annika said. Myth anchors, guardians to keep the tale stable. They're people, Leon said softly. If they talk to Jackson, they're people. I know, Annika said. Being designed doesn't cancel being real. Ask any of us. We argued in the way you argue when every conclusion is a loss dressed up like a plan. I looked down at Stormhold. I looked up at the shimmer that had been sold to an ethics committee as restraint. I thought of Paige Coren's brave grin and of how many braver grins it would take to outstare an orbit. Vesper, I said, ask politely. I already have, she said. Ask impolitely. On it. 5 minutes later, she had a handshake from an address that called itself Steward Node V12. It offered us a brochure. It promised us the comfort of long scales. It recommended we keep our nice ship out of the nice sky before we upset something tender. It was elegant and it was monstrous, and my hands shook the way they do when I am about to add a page to the book I'm not proud of. Jackson, Annika said, warning and permission folded together. We lift at night, I said. We say goodbye for now. And then we pick a fight with the polite people. I did not plan for Aeth to be waiting in the glade when we came. The dragon lowered her huge head and inspected the kite's wake the way a cathedral inspects a moth. Her mind pressed against mine. You are leaving, small bright creature. Your bones beat a war drum. Something like that, I said. Do not be stupid. Or do, but do it beautifully. She turned her head toward the ship. And if your sky house wants to live, teaching it to sing will help. Vesper sings fine, Mara protested. She sings like a window. This one will be a door. Aeth touched the hull with the side of her face. I felt the vibration in my teeth. Vesper's lights flickered, then steadied with a hum I had never heard from her before. Later, she would tell me the dragon's touch had been a map, a set of resonances that taught her which parts of the planet wanted to be left alone and which parts wanted to be shaken awake. Thank you, I said to the dragon. Bring me a sky to bite, Aeth said, and lifted into the air with the sound of a library turning its pages too fast. The plan we made was not clever. Clever gets brittle at speed. We went with simple. Phase 1. Steal a speakable truth. We had Vesper open a dialogue so calm it felt like sleep, asking Steward Node for the mission charter, the document that tells an empire what it's pretending to do. The node sent it, edited of course, but editing never survives anthropology. Between the lines we found the rest. The Meridian array called Galenor a narrative sanctuary. Their pitch was both tender and obscene. Preserve a human culture in a pre-combustion state to study myth in the wild. Protect it from the predations of neighbors who would industrialize it. Ensure the survival of forms of meaning the post-human polities had grown bored of. Keep the story clean. Keep the people busy with dragons and saints and blood that dries into ballads. In return, harvest a fraction of their cognitive surplus by way of dream lattices, using the planetary network of myth anchors as low-entropy compute. Knights dreaming of fire and redemption could run a climate model on the other side of the sky. I have been angrier, but not often. Phase 2. Make allies. I asked Lady Mira to bring 3 people. One who had lost someone to the Sky Priory's taxes. One who did not believe in dragons until one stood on his wall. And one who believed too much. They came, wary but unafraid. Tamsin translated our careful version of the truth and did not flinch when they asked if we were saints. "We're neighbors," she said, "and your neighbors are doing it wrong." The man who had lost someone, his daughter, did not speak. He put his hand on the ship's ramp and cried once, in such a way that my heart felt like an insulting invention. The woman who had not believed in dragons asked if she could meet one, and was very polite when we said, "Not yet." The priest who believed too much asked if Vesper had a soul. Vesper, who tells the truth to priests, said she didn't know and liked it that way. Phase 3. Hit a keystone. The array's network had choke points, tiny satellites that coordinated others. If we could knock a keystone offline without killing anything that breathed, the myth field might slacken. People would invent. Sparks that never caught might catch. The story would misbehave. We picked Keystone 39 Violet because it was over water and because if it fell out of the sky, it would drown quietly the way good plans should. Mara built us a sledgehammer out of molecules that had never expected to be introduced, and kissed it like a bad idea she was fond of. Rafe checked his harness as if he'd misplaced a part of his courage and was determined to find it. Vesper asked very gently whether I wanted to tell anyone up there that we were coming. I thought of the brochure. I thought of the word sanctuary with barbed wire braided into the letters. "No," I said. "They don't get another polite warning." We went up on the dark side, under a blanket of the planet's own shadow. The stars made their unhelpful promises. Anika rode our vector like a long exhale. Vesper sang her new dragon-taught song to the sky until it forgot to watch. We came into range of 39 Violet and found it prettier than a machine that arrogant had any right to be. A tumbler made of mirrors and meanness, petals opening and closing to toss invisible nets. "Hello, little tyrant," Mara said, and loosed the sledgehammer. It didn't explode. It confused. The keystone forgot its job, panicked, overcorrected, tried to hide inside a frequency that Vesper happened to be holding a cup under. We caught it like rain. The grid above the Western Ocean hiccuped and, for the first time in generations, let go. I do not know what invention looks like from space, but I have seen it in a person's eyes. Somewhere below, a girl who had been told all her life that fire behaves if spoken to properly, lit a kiln and watched the flame decide. Somewhere else, a boy reinvented a crank he had built 100 times and felt his whole body understand leverage like prayer. Knights looked up from drills that had been rituals and realized they were also practice. Lady Mira's horn sounded from Stormhold and was answered from 5 different directions, with the wrong melodies, in exactly the right way. We were celebrating without wine when the polite people called back. The voice was a woman's, except for the parts that weren't. It arrived on a thread we hadn't spun and used my name the way only someone who had held it would know how. "Jackson," she said, "you have always been good at stealing the future from its guardians." I forgot how to exhale for a long time. "Mother?" I said, and hated myself for it instantly, but it was too late to be anything but honest. Her name is Elowen Rook. She did not raise me so much as curate my childhood and outsource my tenderness. She is one of the architects of the Meridian array. "Jackson," she said again, "come up and see the grown-up version of the truth." Anika's hand anchored my shoulder. Mara's hand found my elbow. Vesper dimmed the cabin to the color of forgiveness. "Put her on the wall," I said. Director Elowen Rook addressed us from a room too clean to be wise. She wore a gray garment with the good taste to admit it was an armor of a kind. Behind her, a window framed the blue curve of Galenor, and for a second I saw her not as a tyrant, but as a little girl who had kept every library book too long because she did not know how to say goodbye. "You broke my keystone," she said. "Congratulations! Somewhere below, a dozen disasters did not happen because the myth lattice caught them for you. Somewhere else, 7 did happen, and 5 people died. You will want their names later, and you will write them in your book like beads." "I know you." I met her gaze with all the unpracticed grace of a son who has run out of rehearsals. "You aren't protecting them," I said. "You're farming them." She shook her head. "We are pacing them. We learned, to our cost, that sudden change kills the poor and profits the strong. Here, we can keep war small and meaning large. We can make of antiquity a garden. And yes, we can borrow their dreams to run the climate of a dozen worlds where children you will never meet will wake up tomorrow because a night in Stormhold once dreamed clean of fear." "If you said that to Lady Mira," I said, "I think she would bite your wrist, and you would deserve it." Elowen's mouth softened. "She would. I like her." I closed my eyes, and in my mind saw Page Coren's practiced grin. I opened them and saw myself reflected in my mother's window. A dragon crossed that reflection the way storms cross maps. "You're using people," I said. "You can call it anything you like. You're using them." She sighed. "Do you have a better story? One that prevents plagues and keeps gutters clean and leaves mothers with their children and still lets your brave lady invent her beautiful machines? Because you can knock all my keystones down and give them back fire and forget that fire burns hands, especially if they're small." I wanted so much to hate her neatly, Instead, I felt the dull ache of a truth she had twisted around herself like a shawl to keep warm. I looked at Annika. She looked back with the eyes of a friend who has already left one family and is not afraid to leave another. "We have an answer," she said, "for both of us. We share the cost. We don't ask a single world to subsidize the safety of others without their consent. We teach. We make the ramp steeper, but we walk it with them. And we stop stealing their weather." Elowen's jaw worked once. Something private and hurt slipped, and then was gone. "You always did believe in fairy tales," she said softly. "Jackson, go home. Take your nice little ship and your nice fierce friends and go home." Vesper lowered the lights another notch. "She is stalling," Vesper said in our bones. "Time for Phase 4, Mara said. "Phase 4? I said. Mara smiled a smile I have always loved, because it is both reckless and careful. "Get the dragons angry at the sky." You don't convince dragons. Dragons convince themselves and then make you pretend it was your idea. We called Aeth as if we were allowed to call a storm, and she came, bringing 2 more. A copper beast with a laugh for a voice, and a pale thing the size of a small chapel, whose eyes looked like the last good decision you will ever make. They landed around the ship with the soft brutality of rain starting. Lady Mira rode Aeth, and the page with the brave grin hugged his banner like a mast in weather. I told them what we had found. I did not say sanctuary or lattice or compute. I said tether and harvest and stolen choices. I said your sky is hands that don't ask. The copper dragon snorted. "We thought the thunder had a face," he said. "We were bored. Let us bite it." The pale dragon considered me with an attention that felt like the day you realize the tide has been measuring you. "Little captain," she said, "if we bite high, your bones will cook. It would be rude to ruin your song." "I like your etiquette," I said. "We'll aim the bites." We taught them how to see the choke points, or maybe they taught us how they already saw them, and we called that teaching because it felt better. Annika and Mara built a sky whistle, a beacon that told dragons where drones were pretending to be clouds. We strapped it to the hull and took the Kite's wake up with 3 dragons in our wake, like weather that had acquired opinions. The Meridian array did not expect cavalry. We slid under the cover of the dark side and then rose in a slow spiral, Vesper singing the dragon's resonance until the grid lost patience and revealed itself. The first wave came as needles, autonomous darts designed to prick holes in anything that presumed. Aeth's laugh shook them to pieces. The copper dragon caught 3 in his mouth and spit them out like seeds. The pale dragon wrote a curve in the air that convinced a dozen more to vanish into their own arrogance. We hit keystone 44 indigo with a kiss from the sledgehammer and watched the grid over the eastern grasslands loosen like a jaw loosens when it finally tells the truth. Down below, a mill caught wind properly for the first time in a century and wouldn't stop grinning about it. "Jackson," my mother said in my ear, very small now, "please." She wasn't commanding, she was begging. I aimed us at V12, the steward node that had been polite to us. Rafe watched the dark for anything with a temper. Mara cradled the next hammer like it was a baby who had chosen to be born during a thunderstorm. Annika's hand never left my shoulder. "Vesper," I said, "tell me what I don't want to hear." "The lattice dampens more than invention," she said. "It props up medicine and sanitation. If we collapse it all at once, the gutters will fill, as Director Rook said. We will have traded one cruelty for another." "Options," Annika said. "Gradients," Vesper answered. "Loosen, don't shatter. Give them back choice fast. Give them back infrastructure slow, with help." "From who?" Mara asked. "The courteous jailers?" "From us," I said, and felt the shape of a plan settle into place like a bridge deciding to be sufficient. "Captain," Annika murmured, "we are 6 people and a ship that purrs when a dragon kisses her. You want to be a public utility now?" "Just long enough to make the story honest," I said. "Then we leave them the tools. Then we go." The dragons roared together, and the sound made the lights in my visor stutter. We struck 44 indigo, and then 45 cyan, and the grid north of Stormhold sighed, like a kingdom taking its first deep breath after holding one for 100 years. "Enough," I told Vesper. "Now we talk." We did not dock with the director's station. We landed on it the way a river lands on an estuary, polite and overpowering. Rafe and Mara went first, because that's the order in which things break. Annika followed with a calm that turns hallways into liabilities. I walked in last with Vesper in my ear and the smell of clean rooms, trying to pretend they are not wrong. Elowen met us alone, brave or confident or both. Up close, she looked like a person who had slept in a chair for a long time because she believed being present was the same as being kind. "You're bleeding my sky," she said without rancor. "You will break it, Jackson." "No," I said. "We will share it." I handed her the plan Vesper had drawn while we tried not to die. A sequence of graceful failures, a ladder of dropped grids, a calendar of lessening. Alongside it, a compact that would bind the Meridian array to fund sanitation, medicine, and roads for a decade, while the story learned to move again, without touching curriculum or laws or dreams. Elowen read it like a priest reads a death notice. "And if I say no?" Mara set a neat little brick on the desk and smiled apologetically. "Then we'll start with the nodes that keep your plumbing honest." Elowen laughed, only a little hysterically. Then she did what I had both prayed she would and feared she might. She said, "Help me make it gentler than you've written it." That is how wars end when we are lucky, with a pen. It was not simple. Inside the Meridian array, there were other directors who wanted to fight, and one who wanted to make Galenor a ruin just to prove the numbers could be neat again. We played a very public war in which our allies were outrage, embarrassment, and dragons biting cameras. Lady Mira spoke to a council of people whose names were numbers and made them cry without meaning to. The pale dragon curled around the station's sunward windows like a punctuation mark and dared anyone to imagine a world without poets. In private, we bled the grid 1 week at a time. Vesper woke in the small hours and taught sewers to do their old work without the lattice's low-grade miracles. Leon wrote pamphlets on boiling water that read like love letters and delivered them to priests by way of the same boys who had once tithed grain to the Sky Priory. Rafe stood inside a warehouse of drones and dismissed them one by one like soldiers who had been tricked into the service of order. Annika met with a faction of directors who called themselves Repair and taught them how not to be cowards. And I, Jackson Rook, son of the woman who had ordered a lattice around a world to keep it safe from the sin of haste, I walked on the ramparts with Lady Mira and learned the names of everyone who had died because the world had been tidy at the expense of honesty. I wrote them in my book. I visited the man whose daughter had been taken to the Priory and watched him lay a hand on his doorframe and decide to paint it blue. I watched Page Coren laugh because a wheelbarrow had finally been invented in his town and he could carry 2 buckets without breaking his back. The dragons changed too. Without the lattice's insistence, some of their habits loosened. Aeth grew curious about mirrors. The copper dragon developed a taste for music that made him cry at inconvenient moments. The pale dragon began to sleep on a new hill every week, as if she had discovered the hobby of view collecting. We almost made it to a peace you could live in. Then the other plot arrived, the one that makes stories true. It was not Elowen. She had chosen collaboration and would be hated for it by both sides forever. It was director Harlan Voss, a man who had never been told no hard enough to understand it. He launched a failsafe. The grid convulsed. Every keystone we had carefully put on a schedule tried to rise at once. The dragons roared like weather made of grief. Vesper caught the first surge in her teeth and spat it back. "He's trying to reboot the lattice," she said. "It will set our work back a year and snap the medicine out from under 3 cities." "Where is he?" I asked. "Here," Elowen said quietly, and I realized she had known this would come and had brought him inside reach. We met him in a room with too much glass. He was smaller than his memos. People often are. He looked at me and saw a sun wielded like a blade and smiled, because to men like him, everything is a blade if you're clever. "You are very romantic," he said. "It almost makes me want to let your little art project stand. But we built this lattice to keep disproportionate harm off the backs of children. I will not see gutters run red because a captain wanted to impress a dragon." "It's always children, isn't it?" Annika said. "You never let adults vote." He lifted his hand. On the station's rim, somewhere we had not thought to watch because we are not perfect, a pod opened. Not dots this time, crownfires. Devices meant to burn entire narratives out of a sky by reimposing them like a nervous system that won't forget its trauma. Mara moved. She was halfway to the door. Rafe was already gone. "Aeth," I called, and did not use the radio because I did not need to. "I am here," she said, and the window filled with her presence. "You can't burn a story clean," I told Harlan Voss. "You can only burn the people inside it." He sneered because sneering is cheap. "We burnt ourselves into civilization," he said. "This is mercy." It was not. It never is. Then 3 things happened at once. Rafe reached the pod and did something unspeakably brave with a cable and his body. Mara found the primary loop for the station's guidance field and turned it into a prayer wheel, spinning the crownfire's aim just off their cruel vector. And Aeth opened her mouth and sang. If you have never heard a dragon rewrite a frequency, I cannot tell you. It is a stone remembering it was once river. It is a mother forgetting the name of the person who told her the world must be unkind. The crownfires hesitated. One turned. Another turned too much and fell into the ocean like a star that had lost its nerve. The last hung there, stubborn. I looked at Elowen, and she looked at me, and we made a decision that will keep us strangers and family forever. She fed me the chain of permissions that would open Harlan Voss's private control. I took them with hands that will never be clean, and opened the lock and told the last crownfire to sleep. It did. The room forgot to breathe. Harlan took a step toward me with murder dawning in his mouth, and Elowen lifted her hand in a way I had seen 1,000 times in a kitchen and said, "No." He stopped. He did not understand why. He thought it was rank. It was parenthood. Later, there were hearings and resignations and new compacts and old pains. The array signed the promise to share the cost. The lattice was retired in pieces and in ceremonies. Dragons flew over cities with horns at their ankles like bells. Diseases that had been kept dormant rose and were met with clinics that looked like monasteries and smelled like bleach and courage. Roads were built and aqueducts repaired, and the Sky Priory was converted into a library whose windows learned the names of children.
Rafe lived. His back will not always forgive him. Mara married him because the universe abhors two people with the same stupid bravery standing alone for too long. Leon stayed behind to steward the first didactic printworks because she wants her papers to learn to walk. Tamsin wrote a grammar of dragon speech that broke 3 tenured linguists when they realized it was poetry with a circulatory system. Annika and I argued and laughed and forgave in the old way that makes new rooms. And my mother? Elowen Rook asked to be exiled to Galenor for 10 years to serve as quartermaster for the roads she had once prevented and midwife to the gentle failures she had once kept at bay. She sends me letters. I read them sitting under a hatch with my feet in a toolbox, and sometimes I'm generous, sometimes I'm not. That is how forgiveness works when you are honest. As for Aeth, she kept her promise. Months after the last keystone went ceremonial, she came to the glade where we had first learned each other. She lowered her head and let me put my hand on her face, the way you put your hand on a door before you walk through. "Small, bright creature," she said, "your bones hum a different song now." "It's called relief," I said. "And grief," she added gently. "Yes," I said, "those 5 names are in my book." "Bring me a sky that needs biting again," she said, "but not tonight. Tonight we watch your ship leave slowly, like a wary moon." So we did. Kite's wake rose on a pillar of borrowed blue. The forest made the sound it makes when a wind it likes learns a new trick. Lady Mira stood with Page Coren, who had become a knight and still carried the brave grin the way some men carry lanterns. Elowen leaned on a shovel and pretended not to cry. The dragons watched us with that blunt love that is all attention and no promise. Vesper filled the cabin with the quiet hum Aeth had taught her, door, not window. Annika set a course that did not hurry. Mara and Roth argued about a bolt that would hold just fine until the heat death of the universe unless you looked at it. Tamsin hummed the old lullaby buried in the first signal we had heard, and Leon ate an apple like someone making a secular sacrament out of sugar. I opened my little notebook. I wrote, "We went to save a world from its keepers and discovered we were built by the same hands. We waged a war that ended in a plan and a pen. We learned that dragons do not breathe fire so much as they exhale permission. We learned that a story is a tool only if you let it be a trap. Otherwise, it is a road. I closed the book. Vesper dimmed the lights the color of forgiveness. "Captain," she said in my ear, "we have mail." "From who?" "From the Meridian Array. They request a consultation on 3 other sanctuaries to be unsanctuaried with competence." Annika laughed once and covered her face with her hands because sometimes the universe tries to be cute and succeeds. "Public utility," she said. "Just long enough," I said. We slipped into the lane that leads to neighbors. Behind us, a world began to misbehave in all the ways that make life worth the work. Ahead, I knew, there would be other directorates and other cages disguised as gardens. I knew also there would be dragons, because once you have learned to look for what is magnificent and difficult and honest, you keep seeing it. My name is Jackson Rook. I listen. I make mistakes the size of cities. I try to fix them the size of a hand on a door. When the night is quiet enough, I still hear F humming, and if I am very still, I hum back, and the ship hums too, and for a few breaths, I believe we are teaching the future to be braver than we were. And that is the story of how we came to Galenor, where knights rode dragons under a sky curated by polite tyrants, and how we loosened the crown and how a world exhaled. Good night if you are listening in the dark. Breathe. The next page can wait for you. This is Stardust Mysteries, where bedtime meets starflight. If you smiled or shivered, subscribe and ring the bell. Tell me your dragon's name in the comments.